Also ask you to remember Sabrina's mom. She's back. They're at the hospital. Probably going to end up admitting her tonight at some point, I'd guess. So be much in prayer for her. But it is good to be back in the house of the Lord. We're going to go ahead and pray and get started. And like I said, I was telling Brother Mike, we were talking about some of this, and I told him, I said, even as I was studying, even though I knew what I was even looking for, I learned some pretty interesting things myself as I was digging. So I'm excited about sharing some of the things we'll look at tonight. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we do love you. We thank you so much for the privilege that we have to be here tonight, how we thank you for each and every person that's here in person. Father, how we thank you for every person that's here watching via the live stream or YouTube. I pray that you'd just allow me to share what you've given me. May it make sense and help us connect the dots to what's going on today and then what we see in Scripture. And we'll just give you the praise and glory for what you do. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Now, in Revelation chapter 13, verses 15 through 18, we read this. And he had power, this is talking about the second beast or the false prophet. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, in this passage, just those four verses, verses 15 through 18, we see the need for three things, and that's why we're breaking this study down into those three things. Number one, you've got to have a global government, because otherwise you can't control things like he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. Unless there's a central government authority, basically you couldn't force that kind of thing on people. Secondly, there has to be some kind of monetary change, because it says, "And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." So you have to have a monetary system change that's effective globally in order for that to happen. And then lastly, you have to have technology to bring these things together, not only in the buying and the selling, but if you go back to verse 15, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. That takes a tremendous amount of technological change that for something like that to happen. So that's how we've broken down this part of our study. We've looked at the global cooperation and collaboration, that we did that for 2 weeks. Tonight, and probably next week, or definitely next week for sure, we're going to be looking at the monetary changes. And then lastly, we'll look at the technology. And so that's kind of the order. And it all comes just from those four verses to help kind of tie all of these things together. So like I said, we're talking about the changes to the monetary or the financial systems of the world. Now, for decades, prophecy teachers have been talking about a single global currency based on this passage forever. I mean, I'm only 53. I have to do the math to remember how old I am. Yeah, I'm 53. But I can remember from as early back as when I first started even being interested in prophecy, and I was probably 10, 11 years old. I can remember prophecy teachers talking about how there's coming a day when there's going to be a single global currency on the world so that they can control who's buying and selling. If everybody's trading different things, then you can't do that. And all I mean, I can remember that and very vividly. And of course, the older I got, then I got into the ministry, the more I've studied. Over and over and over again, you hear that language. Now, when the European Union, when they established the euro, and it was first introduced in 1999 to 2002 was kind of when they rolled it out. It took them about 3 years, and it covered about 12 countries initially in that initial rollout. Many prophecy preachers declared that the euro was the prototype for that single global currency. I mean, you heard it all the time. Even the European Union's own website today says this: After a decade of preparations, the euro was launched on January 1, 1999. For the first 3 years, it was an invisible currency only used for accounting purposes and electronic payments. Coins and banknotes were launched on 1 January 2002, and in 12 EU countries, or European Union countries, the biggest cash changeover in history took place. Okay? So they worked on it for a decade. There was a 3-year period where everything was just going on behind the scenes, and then they actually rolled out the hard currency. So obviously, major changes have to take place in order for the world's financial systems to be so interconnected that commerce can be controlled by a single person or a single structure, a single government or something like that. And as the quote there basically tells us, major changes take time, okay? Like I said, 10 years plus 3 years, then you actually get into having the hard currency in your hand. So the euro itself was the work of over a decade. Now, the groundwork for what I feel, based on Scripture and based on what's going on today, the groundwork for this global currency that Scripture talks about has been going on, has been being laid, I'll put it that way, the groundwork's been being laid for well over 100 years. Now that sounds kind of woo, but I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. The first major component of the global currency as far as the U.S. was concerned was the creation of what's called the Federal Reserve. Okay? And if you've ever heard them talk about, like right now where they're talking about raising the interest rates, it's the Federal Reserve that's doing that. Anytime that money is printed in the United States, it's not done by the Treasury Department. It's actually done by the Federal Reserve. Okay? And so a lot of people don't even know what the Federal Reserve is other than they hear the term and all of that kind of thing. And this is, again, and I told you when we did this that I, as much as possible, not because I don't think Scripture speaks to these things, but I want you to see that secular and government structures and everything else are the ones talking about this, and it's dovetailing into what Scripture says. So I showed you the quote from the European Union. Well, here's the quote from the Federal Reserve, all right, here in the States. What led to the creation of the Federal Reserve? Now, let's go back for just a minute. What did I tell you when we talked about the global cooperation and collaboration? What you had to have was a crisis to make changes, right? What led to the creation of the Federal Reserve? A particularly severe panic. Sounds like a crisis to me, doesn't it, you? A particularly severe panic in 1907 resulted in bank runs that wreaked havoc on the fragile banking system and ultimately led Congress in 1913 to write the Federal Reserve Act. Now, they're not telling you everything here, okay? If you do the research, and like I said, I'm doing my best to stay on target, but there is so much of this stuff. The actual groundwork for the Federal Reserve was not laid down by Congress. It was the idea, basically, or the project that was championed by one particular senator. He called the heads of the major banks in the United States together, and they met on Jekyll Island and laid out what would later become the legislation that was put before Congress. Okay? And there's a whole... to make sure that people didn't think something funny was going on, or they were worried about, people noticing all these bankers, they met on a train to get to Jekyll Island, and they all came dressed in duck hunting gear to kind of disguise who they were. There is so much, like I said, I got to get back on track, but it's just wild. When you study this stuff, it's wild, okay? What led to the creation of the Federal Reserve? Particularly severe panic in 1907 resulted in bank runs that wreaked havoc on the fragile banking system and ultimately led Congress in 1913 to write the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve System was initially created to address these banking panics. It is now charged with several broader responsibilities, including fostering a sound banking system and a healthy economy. A stable central bank would also strengthen the United States' standing in the world economy because foreign individuals, businesses, and governments have confidence in doing business with a country that has a responsible central bank and economic system. Regionally, the central bank would have to respond to the local needs for currency, which could vary across regions. A lack of available currency had caused the earlier banking panic. And in a sidebar on the same page on the website, it said this. Now remember, the Federal Reserve is also called the central bank. Now, our Federal Reserve System is made up of 12 Federal Reserve banks and then an additional 24 branches. And then it all comes under one head called the Federal Reserve. There's a big one in St. Louis. There's one in Boston. There's one in New York. The one that we actually fall under the control of is Atlanta. And Atlanta has actually 5 branches. So there's 36 total Federal Reserve banks, counting banks and branches, okay? But they all come under one head, and it's just known as the Federal Reserve. But on the sidebar, on that same page, it said this: the central bank is the generic name given to a country's primary monetary authority. A nation's central bank is usually given a mix of responsibilities, including determining the money supply. Okay? Now, that determining the money supply is whether or not you print money. When the government says we need more money to fund the $3 trillion COVID relief, the Treasury didn't print a dime. The Federal Reserve printed all $3 trillion. That's why we've got inflation now. That's another side of the coin. We'll talk about that next time, about how all of this works together. But, so it's talking about creating the money itself and then also controlling the interest rates to try to balance out the printing versus inflation and all that kind of stuff, which is why you're hearing about all the interest rate hikes and all that stuff going on now. It's the Federal Reserve. Now notice this, the Federal Reserve is not part of the government. The Federal Reserve is a group of banks that have been chartered by the government to do the functions they have. Okay? So it's just an interesting thing to keep up with. But anyway, determining the money supply, supervising banks, providing banking services for the government, lending to banks during crises, and promoting consumer protection and community development. Now, so that's the Federal Reserve, or the central bank of the U.S. Now, the idea of a central bank is not a new concept. As a matter of fact, if you look at it historically, the first central bank was created by Sweden in 1668. That was the first on record central bank for any nation. Between 1668 and 1913, which was the establishment of the Federal Reserve here in the U.S. From 1668 to 1913, 19 other central banks were established. Most of those central banks were established around Europe, okay? That was the age of exploration and all of those kind of things. So that's where those central banks actually came from, or arose as a part of that. So the central banks came about, so like I said, 19 other central banks between 1668 and 1913. So that's an average of one new central bank every 12 to 13 years over that period of time. All right? After 1913 and the establishment of the U.S. Federal Reserve, 174 central banks were established in just over 100 years. So from 1913 to now, there's basically been a new central bank established, one or two every year on average, almost 2 a year. Now, each central bank basically has varying responsibilities, but the primary mission is oversight of that particular nation's monetary system. That's their job, is to keep up with what's going on with the money of that nation. That's what a central bank does. So the first step is the establishment of central banks. So there's almost 200 of them now, okay, around the world. The second step in being able to literally connect the central bank dots together was the creation of the Bank of International Settlements in 1930. Now, the reason that it's called the Bank of International Settlements, and I'll just tell you this, again, history, it's interesting. It was established in 1930. The reason that it was established initially, its original charter, was to act as the clearinghouse after World War I, and Germany was defeated in World War I. The nations that Germany had attacked and done all this damage to, as part of the treaty, the peace treaty that was signed, Germany had to pay reparations to all of these countries to help them rebuild after what they did. That's why it's called the Bank of International Settlements. It was Germany settling up with all of the countries that they had attacked during World War II, or during World War I. And interestingly, from a side, again, just a side note on this, it was the absolutely draconian measures that were put on Germany to pay back what they did after World War II, or after World War I, that allowed Hitler to come to power. His argument and his claim to getting into the government and becoming the head of the government was, I will take care of the unfair treatment that we've had since World War I ended. And so Germany was paying tons of money and basically keeping them from doing anything, growing in any kind of level or anything else for years. And this Bank of International Settlements was the bank that everything was going into, and then the different countries would take their piece of the pie. The BIS just acted as the central clearinghouse. Now again, according to the BIS's documents, this is what they say. The bank, now get this, the Bank for International Settlements, or the BIS, today is an international organization that serves central banks and other financial authorities across the globe to support their pursuit of monetary and financial stability through international cooperation. Remember what we talked about last time? Now listen, it also acts as the bank to the central banks. So you've got all of these central banks, and then you've got the bank, the BIS. According to the BIS, established in 1930, the BIS is owned by 63 central banks. Now, like I said, there's almost 200 of them. But these 63 central banks, including the U.S. Federal Reserve, representing countries from around the world that together account for about 95% of world GDP. The GDP is the measure of the worth of a country, the financial worth of a country. So 95% of the world's wealth is held by 63 countries, and their 63 central banks all are part of this one organization called the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements. See how you're getting closer and closer to a single authority? All right. Now, the U.S. did not officially join the Bank of International Settlements until 1994. Okay? Now, the reason was because, number one, when it was first established, like I said, it was basically Germany and the European nations, and America said Germany didn't do anything to us. They don't owe us any reparations, so we don't need to be a part of the BIS. So over time, things continued. Then you had World War II, and then you had the Cold War. And the BIS was loaning money to countries that were a part of the Eastern Bloc. So because of the Cold War, the U.S. did not participate in the BIS because it was seen as a conflict of interest. So it wasn't until the fall of communism and the fall of the Soviet Union, until all of that had to happen and things had to settle down. And then in 1994, the U.S. joined. So, since the Bank of International Settlements represents 95% of the world's GDP, it's truly a global organization that basically controls the world's finances. Again, for all intents and purposes, there is that 5% that's floating out there, but if you got 95%, you got it all. I mean, let's just be honest. So the structure for a global currency is already in place through the operation of the BIS. So you have the local banks and the credit unions. They get money from the central banks. The central banks then all go, the major ones, the first or the big 63. They then all report up to, and there's this one organization called the BIS, or the Bank of International Settlements. But here's the question. Like I said, prophecy teachers, and the thing about prophecy, especially when you're trying to teach prophecy, and I try to keep this in mind all the time, this is one of the reasons you'll hear me make a lot of caveats about stuff, is we interpret prophecy based on what we know at the time. For instance, the passage in Revelation where it talks about the whole world seeing the two witnesses. Prophecy scholars had no idea how that was going to happen. Everything from the whole world population was going to be destroyed, and basically everybody lived in a small area, and that's why everybody was able to see the two witnesses when they rose from the dead and all that kind of stuff. And then came this marvelous little box called TV. And prophecy teachers and preachers went nuts. We now know how the whole world is going to see the two witnesses. They'll see it on TV. But Scripture makes it sound like you're going to see it in real time. And we don't know what goes on in Europe till 8 hours later, or we don't know what happens in Asia till 12 hours later. How's that going to work? And then you had this wonderful invention called satellites and satellite TV and cable news networks and prophecy preachers since then. And now we've got the internet. So we have seen for well over 100 years the pieces of the puzzle come together so that that part of Revelation can easily be fulfilled. And so now talking about the global currency, up until just very recently, it made perfect sense to believe that you're going to have a single global currency like a euro. Like I said, when the euro came out, people, prophecy preachers and teachers everywhere, man, there's the prototype. It's going to be a single currency for the whole world, not just the European Union. And again, that made sense based on what we knew at the time. But does it have to be a single currency? Or does technology give us another option where buying and selling can be controlled around the world without moving to a single currency? And the answer is yes, there is. But even without a global currency, we've already seen individual nations try to control what people do with their hard currency, the stuff that we've got today, dollars and whatever. In February of 2022, Canada froze the assets of truckers and companies involved in what was known as the Freedom Convoy, where they stopped up the border going in from the U.S. into Canada, especially out of Detroit. The Canadian government under Prime Minister, I think it's Prime Minister Trudeau. I can't remember the title. I know it's not president, so I'm guessing it's Prime Minister. Under Prime Minister Trudeau, basically said, if you're participating in the Freedom Convoy, we are shutting off your bank accounts. This is hard cash. Okay? According to one Bloomberg article, Canadian banks froze about 7.8 million Canadian dollars, or about 6.1 US million, in just over 200 accounts under emergency powers meant to end protests in Ottawa and at key border crossings, a government official said Tuesday. Trudeau and his ministers have said the measures announced last week are meant to cut off, and this was an article in February, cut off funding to protest leaders and to pressure trucking companies to prevent their semis from being used again in blockades. The financial dragnet included halting transactions totaling $3.8 million from a payment processor, as well as the freezing of 219 financial products, the disclosure of 57 entities, and 253 Bitcoin addresses shared with virtual currency exchanges, according to a statement Monday from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Those moves have been criticized as overreach by the opposition Conservative Party. They've also raised the ire of trucking companies whose rigs were involved in the protest. I am extremely disappointed in our government, Lynn Petkow, owner of Manitoba-based Terrain Transport, said by phone. We'll keep fighting for our rights as best as we can, but it's very clear we're under siege here. Our freedom is. So even with hard currency, the Canadian government stepped in and froze their bank accounts. Another interesting aspect of that is that even donations given by other people from all over the world were also frozen during that time so that they could get no help whatsoever. The Ontario Superior Court of Justice issued an order halting access to funds collected via the Give, Send, Go website, Canadian outlet Global News reports. Protesters had raised millions via Freedom Convoy 2022 and Adopt a Trucker campaigns on the site. But government officials in Ontario asked the court to stop organizers from accessing and doling out those funds, a request that was granted Thursday. Ivana Yelich, a spokesman for the Office of the Premier of Ontario, told the outlet. Protesters were initially able to use GoFundMe to garner financial support and raised around $7.8 million before GoFundMe put a stop to the fundraiser for violating its terms of service and opted to refund all donors. So even though other people were giving them money, they couldn't access it either because the government put a stop to it. So that right there tells us that even with the structures that we have now, if you wanted to stop somebody from buying something, you could do it. And we talked about in the last section on global governance that the funds and resources of Russian politicians and Russian oligarchs have been frozen in response to the conflict in Ukraine. So the ability to control people's finances if they're on the wrong side of an issue, whatever that issue happens to be, is already in place. But a new technology has arisen that allows for centralized control of banking and I'm including spending and savings, that doesn't require a single global currency in the traditionally understood sense. And that new technology is what's called cryptocurrency. Okay? A definition of cryptocurrency is a digital, encrypted, and decentralized medium of exchange. And that picture there is a picture of a token for what's called Bitcoin. It's the most popular. Right now, a single Bitcoin is worth about, as of lunchtime today, was worth almost $24,000. People have become millionaires because of Bitcoin. Now, like I said, most people have heard of Bitcoin. Some people have heard of Ethereum and some of the other big players out there in the market. But the truth is there are more than 19,000 different cryptocurrencies in circulation today. One of the attractive parts of cryptocurrencies is the fact that they bypass central banks. That's one of the actual things that it's touted as. As a matter of fact, you can't see it on this, but on the coin itself, the token, is the word decentralized right at the top of the coin. So one of the major drawing points, or one of the most attractive aspects of this, is the fact of it being decentralized where you don't have a central bank. And yet you can still, even though it's not put out there by a bank, if this company over here wants to do business with this company over here and both of them are okay with using Bitcoin to do it, they'll do it. They don't have to use traditional methods of exchange. The downside of cryptocurrencies is that they have no real value. They're a digital creation. There's no physical asset with Bitcoin. I mean, they print you these tokens just as, but it's like monopoly money. It doesn't do anything. But there's no physical asset behind it. And so it's only worth what people are willing to pay for it and what they're willing to spend in resources to get it. But it really doesn't have any physical worth itself, say like gold or silver or platinum or something like that. Because the cryptocurrencies are outside governmental or central bank control, many central banks are now investing in creating their own digital currency, where the hard assets that you have in a bank, say your savings account, your checking account, whatever, and it doesn't matter whether it's U.S. dollars, whether it's pesos, whether it's euros, whether it's the Chinese yuan, it doesn't matter. Those hard assets will be converted to electronic currency, and then at that point, all transactions can be completed digitally. Now, most people now already do much of their business electronically. Fund transfers, electronic bill payments, automated transfers from a checking account into a savings account, and I speak on all. We do all of those in one way or another, even at home. So the switch to a central bank digital currency, and that's what right now they're called in a nutshell, or a CBDC, will be a fairly smooth transition for most people because they're already used to doing it. You pay for stuff on a credit card, and you pay for it with the credit card. Well, that's digital. And then you send an electronic check, or you send the electronic, from the credit union to pay for your credit card bill. You never see the physical cash. Okay? So we're already used to working in a digital world. The difference with a CBDC is that if I went to a bank right now, and I said, and I'm making up a number here just to make it easy. Let's say I've got $1,000 in savings. And I go to my credit union and I say, I want my $1,000. Well, you know what they got to do? They got to give you my $1,000 in tens, 20s, hundreds, whatever it is I want it in, right? Once you convert your hard assets to a digital currency, guess what you can't do? You can't go to the bank and say, I want my $1,000 in hard cash. They're going to say, there is no such thing as hard cash. Everything is digital now. And we'll talk more about the implications of that in the next one. Right now, I'm taking my time to just lay out the foundational stuff, all right? So, in September of 2021, the Bank of International Settlements, remember the Big Daddy Bank, told the member central banks, the 63, to prepare for the advent of central bank digital currencies. This was September of 2021. In May of 2022, a survey showed that 87 countries, representing over 90% of the global economy, are working on central bank digital currencies. So even banks that are not part of the 63 are working on digital currencies right now. One of those, by the way, is the Central Bank of the Bahamas. And I don't think it's part of the CBD or the BIS. I'm not 100% sure of that. But the International Monetary Fund, and that's another global financial institution, and the U.S. is a member of that one as well. According to them, no, wait a minute. Sorry, I jumped ahead. The World Economic Forum, and this is what they say their purpose is, to engage the foremost political, business, cultural, and other leaders to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. I love that term, to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. The World Economic Forum, they see their job as making sure that everybody's playing on the same page. So this encompasses government and it encompasses economics. All right? They've been publishing different things related to CBDCs already. Digital Currency Governance Consortium White Paper Series. That's a 223-page report on what you have to do or where we're at currently in creating CBDCs. I've got that on my computer. 223 pages, I think. It's 225 or 223. World Economic Forum, Central Bank Digital Currency Policymaker Toolkit. This is a short document that basically lays out, if you're going to establish a CBDC, these are the steps you need to do, and these are the things you need to consider. It even comes with a flow chart, and that's only a piece of the flow chart. So you've got the BIS telling the banks, the central banks, start moving toward a digital currency. You've got the World Economic Forum, which is another global organization, creating the documentation that's necessary so that you know how to create the CBDCs. And then you've got the International Monetary Fund, which is another global financial institution, and again, another thing that the U.S. is involved in, that works to achieve sustainable growth and prosperity for all of its 190 member countries. It does so by supporting economic policies that promote financial stability, monetary cooperation, which are essential to increase productivity, job creation, and economic well-being. Now, again, the International Monetary Fund, again, it's an international organization, 190 countries, and they are often viewed, the International Monetary Fund is often viewed as the bank of last resort. If you can't get a loan as a country from anywhere else, you go to the International Monetary Fund and they will float you a loan. But I'm going to tell you what, loan sharks in the U.S. are jealous of what the IMF does. When Greece, Greece has gone bankrupt now like 3 times in the last 25 years. And they have so crippled the economy of Greece with the requirements for them to get these loans that it'll probably be another 15 years before they can even think about breaking even. The International Monetary Fund is a bank in and of itself, but it is, and like I said, I'm not going to get into all the different things, but it can be draconian. I've seen some of the stuff. It is absolutely amazing. Now, according to the IMF's website, the IMF has 3 critical missions: furthering international monetary cooperation, encourage the expansion of trade and economic growth, and discouraging policies that would harm prosperity. Like I said, that one to me is always funny given what they do. To fulfill these missions, IMF member countries work collaboratively with each other and with other international bodies. And they, too, are pushing moving to a CBDC. They just recently published a summary of the world's efforts in developing CBDCs, and it was entitled "Behind the Scenes of Central Bank Digital Currency: Emerging Trends, Insights, and Policy Lessons." So do you get the idea? You have central banks, you have the BIS, you have the World Economic Forum, you have the International Monetary Fund. Do you get the idea that there's a global push to create a global digital currency? It's coming from everywhere at the global level. Now, in March of 2022, President Biden signed Executive Order 14,067. And it was entitled "Ensuring Responsible Development of Digital Assets." This is a 10-page executive order. And yes, I read it. It was painful, but I read it. And it outlines a path for the creation of a U.S. dollar-based CBDC. It's being called right now, colloquially, FedCoin instead of Bitcoin. Now, will that be the final name? Probably not. But that's what they're calling it right now, FedCoin. According to Section 4 of the executive order, sovereign money is at the core of a well-functioning financial system, macroeconomic stabilization policies, and economic growth. My administration, of course, this is Biden, my administration places the highest urgency on research and development efforts into the potential design and deployment options of a United States CBDC. These efforts should include assessment of possible benefits and risks for consumers, investors and businesses, financial stability and systemic risk, payment systems, national security, the ability to exercise human rights, financial inclusion and equity, and the actions required to launch a United States CBDC, if doing so is deemed to be in the national in the national interest. Okay? Now you have to understand, the decision to go to CBDC has already been made. So it's not a matter of whether it's going to be in the national interest or not. When every other country is going over to a CBDC, the U.S. right now is playing catch up. China's been doing this now. They've been working on their CBDC for almost a decade. They're actually using CBDC for some behind-the-scenes stuff like the Euro did. Stuff that's behind-the-scenes paperwork change, or just paper trails and that kind of thing. China's been doing it forever, or for, like I said, longer than anybody else. Europe's been working on it now for quite some time. So this was Biden's attempt to catch up. So it's not whether it's going to be in the best interest or not. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of, what's it going to take to get us there. And that's what this executive order is all about. The executive order actually calls for interagency cooperation between 17 cabinet-level positions, the Federal Reserve, that's our central bank, and 6 other federal agencies. There's a whole paragraph that lists nothing but the people that are going to be involved. And it's everybody from the Department of Defense to the Department of the Interior, just everybody is involved, all right? The EO recognizes, basically, that the U.S. is behind other countries, especially China, like I said, and so it calls for action. When you read the whole thing, it actually calls for action to put the U.S. in a leadership position on the creation and implementation of a digital currency. In other words, it's not just about catching up, it's about getting ahead. And that's what this executive order is all about. Now, here's the key to understand. With a global CBDC system that would be controlled like by the Bank of International Settlements, you don't need a single global currency. You can still have your U.S. digital dollar and a U.S. or a Mexican digital peso and a European digital euro and a Chinese digital yuan. But all the transactions, since it's digital, all the transactions are handled by a single electronic ledger system. It's not the coins that matter. It's the computer system behind the coins that's the single system. Everybody will put their stuff in there, and then that way, if the U.S. is paying a debt that they owe to China, it's done electronically. If China is paying off somebody over here, it's done electronically. So you can have Chinese yuans, you can have U.S. dollars, but you've got this one single system behind the scenes, this electronic ledger, that allows the countries and companies in those countries to do business with each other, and you don't have to have a single currency because you have a single system. Cryptocurrencies have been the pilot for this. They've been doing it. They have their own ledgers. And the ledgers themselves, and you may have heard this term, the ledgers themselves are called blockchain. You may or may not have heard that term if you've ever dealt with cryptocurrencies, but blockchain is the ledger. So imagine, and this is a really oversimplified explanation, but it'll at least make the point. Imagine an Excel spreadsheet for a minute. The spreadsheet itself, the whole spreadsheet, is the ledger system. This page would be the U.S. CBDC block. Then you'd have another page in the same spreadsheet that's the Euro, the Canada, the Great Britain, the Euro, the Chinese yuan. Each of those pages is their particular piece, their particular block. So that page is a block. Because they're all in the same system and they're connected to each other, it's called a blockchain. So that's really a simple way of understanding blockchain. It's just all of the different electronic ledgers connected together in one place. So it just kind of gives you an idea of kind of what it would be like. That's why it's called a blockchain. Each page of the ledger is for a particular country or company or whatever. That page is a block. Then because they can communicate between the pages, they're connected together, it's called a blockchain. That's about as easy as I can make it. in the short term. Like I said, there's more to it than that, but that's the overall picture, okay? So you don't need a single currency. What you need is a single system. And that's already out there. And it's being developed and refined right now. But here's the key. There has to be a reason or reasons to cause these nations to move towards a CBDC. Why is everybody wanting to do this? What's the deal? Well, according to Augustin Carstens, who is the general manager of the Bank of International Settlements, so he's the head dog at the BIS, all right? The implementation of a CBDC is important for one primary reason. Now, Aaron's going to pull up a video here. The guy's got a terribly thick accent. So I've asked Aaron to pull up with that video the subtitles, okay? Because he's hard to understand.
And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are cash is.
Now go back to the slides. Did you catch what he said?
I've been getting paid
I'm sorry? Well, I'm going to show you. That's why we're going back to the slides. I was smart enough to go ahead and copy it onto the slide too. But the reason I wanted you to see the video is because I wanted you to see I wasn't making this stuff up. This is the head of the BIS, okay? Yes, okay? Augustin Carstens. But this is what he said. We don't know who's using a $100 bill today. And we don't know who's using a 1,000 peso bill today. The key difference with the CBDC is the central bank will have absolute control, his words, on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. That expression of central bank liability are digital dollars, digital pesos, digital yuan, digital euros, whatever it is. That's what they consider, that's what they call a liability, is the actual dollars. So what he just said was, they will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability, and also will have the technology to enforce that. Those are two issues that are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is. In other words, if you use cash, we can't track what you're buying and selling. But if we go over to a CBDC, we can track everything you do. And not only can we track what you do, but we can control what you do. Because you can program digital currencies. And we'll talk more about this next time. I'll just whet your appetite. Let's say your employer is Pepsi. And I'll just use that as an example. And you get paid every 2 weeks. Any digital dollars that you get paid from Pepsi, they can put a control limit on that says you cannot buy a Coca-Cola product. Because you're colluding with the enemy. Now think about what happened in Canada. Think about what Revelation 13 and verse 17 says. And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. You don't have to have a single global currency. You just have to have a single global system that controls the currency. And that's what's being developed right now. Questions or comments? Sir? Because nobody has gone completely over to CBDCs yet. Everybody, there's a map, and if I remember, I'll put it in the slides next time. But the question is, are they trying to control the Russian ruble this way right now? The answer is nobody has an established, fully functional CBDC at this point, okay? Everybody that's involved in the 63 nations plus are at different stages. China is farther along. They're actually doing internal, behind-the-scenes stuff with it, but they're not doing anything internationally. Nobody else is that far along. The U.S. is actually playing catch-up. Like I said, that's what they're doing right now. But Europe is ahead of us. Basically, everybody's ahead of us. And so, and this was actually proposed under the previous administration, but because of the concerns about who controls what, it was never put into place. Of course, now this executive order has been put into place. And so every government agency, and if you read the report, like I said, it's 10 pages long. There are deadlines that in 90 days, from March 9th, 2022 is when it was signed. 90 days, these reports have to be presented to these groups of people. At 120 days, these other reports have to be given to this group of people. At 180 days, it's this set of reports. So they're pushing the envelopes to really get up to speed and get this thing out into a testing phase like a lot of the other countries are right now. Now, we'll talk more about this next time, and I'm trying not to jump ahead too much because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about to get there. But the reason the U.S. is in such a hurry to play catch-up is because, think about this logically for just a second. If you're going to convert to a CBDC, let's say the U.S., and I'll just use the U.S. as an example, and we'll talk more about this next time. But let's say the U.S. is going to convert to a CBDC, and they tell you, okay, everybody, you got 30 days, and we're going to turn all of your dollars in your saving account into digital currency for the same amount. So you go, and you take your $1,000 out, and you put it in a bank somewhere that's not gone over to a CBDC yet, so that you've still got hard currency. So what's got to happen is that basically that 63 nations that controls 95% of the GDP is going to have to convert simultaneously to keep people from taking their money out and putting it somewhere else as a shelter so that they still have hard currency. Now, that's also, and I have talked to my financial planner about this because he's a good Christian man, and he actually made the mistake of bringing it up to me. We have a lot of good conversations and about prophecy and everything else. And he brought this up, and we were talking about it. I said, now you tell me if I'm wrong. I said, but what about all these people that's got gold and silver in their savings portfolios, 401ks, whatever? I said, they're going to have to outlaw gold and silver as a medium of exchange, because if they don't, then people are just going to take their dollars out and buy gold and silver. And he said, yeah. So all of these people that have got all this gold and silver as a hedge, it's not going to be worth anything when they switch over, because they will basically tell you your gold and silver is now going to be converted to CBDC, and you won't have gold to hold anymore either, because you can't have a loophole or the CBD system itself actually crashes. So gold and silver goes away. The dollars go away. Any kind of a tangible asset that is used as a medium of exchange. Diamonds. Now, they'll use them in jewelry, but to use it to pay for something like it used to be done, you can't do that anymore, because it will be outlawed as a system of currency. And what's going to happen to all these Bitcoin millionaires when they say Bitcoin is no longer a viable electronic option? By force of law, you have to use a CBDC. All of that's going to happen simultaneously. That's why the U.S. is trying to catch up. Because everybody's going to have to flip the switch at the same time. No, it's not been backed by gold since 1970 something. Nixon took the U.S. dollar off the gold standard in 1970. And that's why it's called a note. And it's also called, the other term for it's called fiat money, which basically, and fiat money just basically means it's worth what people think it's worth. there is no gold standard behind it. That's why inflation can go so out of control, because there is no backing for that dollar. If you've got a dollar and there's $1 worth of gold to back it up, then it's always worth $1. But if you take the money, the paper money, off of that gold standard, then you can say that dollar is worth whatever. The problem is the more paper you print, the less that particular piece of dollar is worth, because there's nothing to back it up. And so the whole U.S. government, the reason that they say, right now they're saying one of the issues from an economic standpoint, and again, I'm going to try not to get into the high weeds here, but right now the U.S. dollar is trading strongly against other currencies. Now, that sounds good, but the problem is it means when we try to sell something into another country, it's costing that other country a lot of money, because the dollar is worth more than their money. And so there's always this push and balance system to try to keep the dollar at a particular place so that you can trade internationally. Now, what's just happened, and we'll talk about this next time. I was going to mention this. Remember we talked about the BRICS countries in the global government thing? The International Monetary Fund actually has what they call a reserve basket. And basically, where right now the U.S. dollar is the node of exchange for transactions around the world. Everybody trades in U.S. dollars because it's so strong. Russia and Iran and a couple of other countries are now pushing to move away from the U.S. dollar as the medium of exchange and instead use this basket of currencies that's got the U.S. dollar, the Russian ruble, Chinese yuan, and other types of money in the basket. And that what you would basically have to trade is your U.S. dollars for this basket. I can't remember what it's called right now. But you trade for that, and then that's what you do your business transactions in. And the reason Russia wants to do that is to devalue the dollar. Because the minute that the U.S. dollar no longer is the exchange of choice for business transactions around the world, the value of the U.S. dollar will plummet because it's not backed by anything. The only thing it's backed by now is everybody wants it. If nobody wants it, then the value drops. And so what Russia is trying to do, and they pulled this stunt twice in the past, where they've tried to move away from the U.S. dollar every time their economies got in trouble, to this basket, because the U.S. dollar's in there, but the ruble's also in there, and the yuan's also in there, and a couple of others that I can think of off the top of my head. And so, but nobody's money today is based, well, I say nobody, I can't speak for all 100 or 200 some nations in the world, but 190 of them anyway. Nobody's money is actually based on an equivalent amount of fine metals, whether it's gold, silver, or whatever. It's all fiat money. That's why in Venezuela, when they had the recent trouble, their inflation rate went 100. It was cheaper. What was the country? Was it Nigeria? This was a few years ago. That it was actually cheaper to wallpaper their walls with money than it was to take the money and try to buy wallpaper. Okay? And the reason that happens is when inflation gets so out of control that the money itself becomes worthless. Well, the only reason that happens is because there's nothing behind it. And so every currency in the world, like I said, I won't say that dogmatically as if I know every country, but almost all of them have no backing behind them. It is all fiat money. And so that's how you get into hyperinflation and all kinds of interesting little things. But that's, again, That's why I said when the time comes and they flip the switch, if you've got holdings in the term for investments is glitter, gold, silver, platinum, whatever's in the basket. Okay, if you've got holdings in that, they will give you some equivalent of that in CBDC, whatever it is. Now, my question will always be, will it be a one-to-one exchange? And my personal opinion is I doubt it. If you've got $1,000 in gold, they may give you $900 in CBDC because they're the ones that call the shots. And they can artificially deflate the markets, and it will. Once people know that the gold isn't worth the gold, the market will drop, and that's when they will then do the conversion, and you won't get nothing out of what you got. So, yeah, the governments that have it, and basically they'll turn your gold in, and we'll give you you got to give us the gold you have, or it's done electronically, or if you actually have it in your possession, because I know some people have gold shipped to their home or whatever, you will have to take that to a bank, and then they will give you the CBDC equivalent of whatever they want it to be called. And then from there, it goes to the National Treasury, or it goes to the central bank. And at that point, then, and most people, I don't know if people are aware of this or not, but any profits that the central bank makes with the loans and stuff that they lend out to banks who then loan out money, and so everybody gets a piece of the pie. Any profit that the central bank makes, at least here in the U.S., any profit that the central bank makes will automatically go to the U.S. Treasury. So yes, it goes back to the government. But that's the problem. There won't be anybody. They will flip the switch simultaneously across the world. Right. Right. But the problem is, what are you going to do with that $100? You got nothing. I mean, everything, any hard cash you have, there will be a date. I mean, this is a little bit of etymology, but I mean, you've seen similar things in the past, so I can kind of say this is what's going to happen, because they've done this in countries where they have changed, like in Europe with the euro. If you don't give me your $100 by the end of July 31st, if I don't have that $100 paper money by July 31st, then you can't exchange it for anything. It's worthless. It's just like Confederate bucks. Yes. 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 Right. And that's exactly what will happen. But it won't just be cash. It will be gold, any kind of a financial asset. They'll have to flip the switch simultaneously, or people will take advantage of the loopholes. And so that's why I said, that's why this whole thing with Biden, with President Biden, you got to be respectful. With President Biden, and I mean, seriously, he is the president. You need to be respectful. But with President Biden and this executive order, that's why they're saying we're basically playing catch up. Because everybody's got to do it at the same time, and everybody's going to want to do it fairly soon. And I say fairly soon, we're talking about 3 to 5 years. Right now, this is the time frame. Yeah. When the dollar collapses, you'll still have, yeah. But if you change what's legal currency, which is, yeah, as soon as you change what is legal currency and you change it to the CBDC, and if you don't have your gold and your dollars to them by a certain date, then it don't matter if you've got that chunk of gold, it's going to be worth nothing. It's not going to matter whether you got $100 in paper money. Use it to start the fire to keep yourself warm. That's all it's going to be good for. Yeah. We don't know who's using a $100 bill today, and we don't know who's using a 1,000 peso bill today. The key difference with the CBDC is the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use. There's your control. Control the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also will have the technology to enforce it. Not only will we know what you've bought, we can prevent you from buying things we don't want you to buy. And that's straight from the BIS. I didn't make that up. That's why I wanted you to see the video. Oh yeah. Food City, the Food City value card thing. I mean, yeah, I like getting 15 cents off a gallon. But the reason they want you to use that card is they want to know everything you buy because they're trying to figure out what stock their store's with. I can't tell you today, not a joke. Just doing Google searches. Of course, Google owns Facebook, and Google also owns YouTube. All of it's part of Meta. When I was doing Google searches for information on central bank and euro, and I typed in Karsten's name and the BIS, I went to Facebook, and half of the video recommendations for me was Karsten's talking at different presentations. Because I had, in a Google search, looked up Karsten's, BIS, CBDC. Half the videos came up were him talking about it at different places. And I had to go through 4 before I found the one I found that you could at least read the subtitles on because they were halfway right. The others, his accent was so bad, the other subtitles weren't even close. And I finally found that one. I had to watch 4 before I found one. And so there's your next piece of the puzzle. And this is the technology piece. If you're going... No. Aaron's had them since he was 16. Yes. Yeah. Agreed. But if you're going to be paid for a service, you will have to have an electronic account that money can be put into. And you will be able to do a transfer. Not this, that's not what I meant to pull out. Credit card. Yeah. So let me show you how this would work. Ain't a teenager I know of ain't got a cell phone. And you got your credit card that ties to your CBDC account. Kid has his cell phone. You ever been at Walmart or Food City and you take your card and you just lay it on the machine and it goes green and does your transaction? Yeah. You lay your phone, exactly. Or, like today, I got a haircut. And thank you. I'm thinking and talking at the same time. It's always dangerous. Brittany's got the square. That's what I'm saying. The technology's there to make that an easy thing. And, it's already there being used, and people are so used to it now they don't even think about it. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. It dropped, yeah. 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 Well, like I said, what will eventually have to happen is, and that will be the thing with the CBDCs, is if everything has to be transacted, that's the word I was looking for. If everything has to be transacted with an approved CBDC, then Bitcoin becomes no more valuable than gold at the same time. So because you just outlaw Bitcoin, and you outlaw, because it doesn't do you any good to say, like right now. I mean, I went to the Relic Room over the weekend when Aaron and I went on our father-son trip, and they had stashes in the Relic Room of Confederate dollars. $100 Confederate dollars. I'd go to a bank and try to cash one. Watch what happens. Nothing. Because it's just a piece of paper. And that's exactly what will happen with this. When they flip the switch, nothing but CBDC will be legal currency. And so you can have it, but it's going to be worth absolutely nothing. Ask yourself the question, do you really want the government teaching you? I wouldn't trust the government to tell my mom and dad where their checking account was. Yeah. No. What I'm seeing right now is that I would expect every country in the world to be at least piloting their CBDCs, at least internally, within 3 to 5 years. Now, how fast that will translate into everything being done by CBDC, who knows? But I'm looking at 3 to 5 years based on all the reading that I've done in the last several weeks. Because, like I said, China's already doing it as a ledger system. They're already doing it internally. Europe is getting close. Bank of Bahamas is close. Bank of Bahamas, that's another reason I'm not going to disparage the banks of Bahamas, but we've all heard of shell companies. So that's why they're so far ahead of the curve. And stuff like that. The numbers that I'm reading right now are 3 to 5 that they will be heavily piloting, at least internally. After that, it's just a matter of when they want to flip the switch. But like I said, for it to work, global, you have to have everybody on the system at the same time. Because if you don't, take your dollars and make German or cash them into euros. At least it's hard cash. And so everybody will basically be forced to the system at the same time. And there will be a magic date. So that if you do have physical gold, now if you got electronic gold like I do in my 401k, it's electronic gold. I haven't seen it, I've never seen a picture of it. I just know it's a part of my portfolio. It'll convert. But if you've got gold at home in a chest or in a mason jar in the backyard, you're going to have to dig it up and take it to the bank, and then they will convert that to CBDCs. And if you still got gold after that cutoff date, you're done. You sit there and like, oh, it'd be pretty. Melt it down and make spoons or something. But yes. Yeah, yeah. So, if I'll mow your yard if you'll paint my barn, that could still go on. But that's another piece of the puzzle that I'm not going to get into in this particular study, unless people hit me and want me to really bad, is why have there been almost 30 food production plants have mysterious fires in the last 3 months? Why are multi-billionaires buying up all the farmland in major swaths across the U.S., let alone other places? Why is the majority of the wealth in the U.S. basically controlled by 2 hedge fund companies, BlackRock and Fidelity? There's all kinds of questions. Like I said, I'm trying to be nice and not get bogged down. But like I said, if you got a particular question, I'll be glad to try to answer it. It may take me a week or two to do the digging, but that's okay. I'll do it. Comments or questions? Do you see how close we are? Do you see how the technology is coming? I mean, we've not even got to the technology piece about how an image can speak. We're going to do that 2 weeks from now or thereabouts. Because next week we'll talk about the money thing and the control and what they can and can't do and all that kind of good stuff. Once you go over to a CBDC, we'll talk about that next week. Right. 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 Exactly. Oh yeah. Yeah, because of what opened up at the casino. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's the bank's money. It's not yours when it's a credit card. Now, if it's a debit card, you can do that because it's your money. But if it's a credit card, you can't. Yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, that's it. Somebody else. Did you learn something tonight? Like I said, it's amazing. And I honest to Pete, and I'm not making this up, I'm sharing about this much of everything that I've read. Because if I got bogged down in the details with you all like I've got bogged down just reading it, we'd be here forever. But it's amazing at the stuff. Like I said, there's a 223-page report that I've only scanned. I've not even looked at it hard enough to see everything it's talking about. But it's got gobs of information in it. Somebody else. Father, we love you. And we thank you for two things, specifically tonight. One, we thank you for our salvation. If we know Jesus Christ as our Savior, we don't have to worry about the mark of the beast. But Father, we also thank you for the opportunity you've given us to share that truth of the gospel with others so they don't have to experience the things that we read about in the book of the Revelation. Help us to be vigilant, not to be scared, just to be vigilant, pay attention to what's going on around us. Because there's nothing in Scripture that says we can't move to a CBDC before you come. The technology is just being put in place that will allow what we're seeing in the book of the Revelation. So help us to be vigilant. Help us to be prayerful. Help us to live by faith, knowing the same thing that Peter told the lame man. Silver and gold have I none, but what I have give I to you. In the name of Jesus. Father, we love you. We give you the praise for it all. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.